What is going on, comic fam? It is your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am joined by comic creator Jason Starr. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited. You are a novelist. You've written a lot of novels. You have written comics for Marvel, for DC, most recently for AWA, and that's kind of where I found you with Red Border. Um, and we're going to be talking about your newest book coming out uh, from AWA called Casual Fling, and I'm really
Uh-huh.
excited to just talk to you about some comics. So,
Let's go. Let's do it.
before I get into your new book coming out, I always got to ask, and especially with you, with all your background with comics that you've written already, how did you get into creating comics?
Well, I think everyone has their own path. Every comics creator I've met has a different way of getting in. I think I could be wrong, but I think Jason Aaron, for example, uh, was in some contest for Marvel for his first comic. Other people have had web comics. Some people, um, and including me, have gotten into comics by doing other things first. So I've had, as you mentioned, I'm also a novelist, and I've written many crime novels and thrillers. And so the way I got into comics is some editors just happened to read my books or found out about them word of mouth. And I think the first thing I got was I got involved with was at Vertigo when an editor, Will Dennis, had me write an introduction for which one was it first? For Brian Azzarello's comic, 100 Bullets. So there was one, each issue had like a different writer, crime writer, writing an introduction. So I was one of the writers who wrote an introduction to that. So then I got to talking to Will, and he was starting Vertigo Crime at that point. So he was open to pitch, if he wanted in particular crime writers to pitch ideas. So Ian Rankin, who's a crime novelist, ended up writing one. Me and some other crime writers, and there were a lot of comics writers as well. But so that's sort of how I got into it. So they accepted one of the ideas. But at the same time, I met some other editors at DC. Azzarello got me involved in a comic he was doing there, the Doc Savage, Batman, Avenger mashup, and I was writing the Avenger, not the Avengers, the Avenger, Benson stories in the back. They were like little 10-page stories that ran along with the main stories, and then I wrote on some of the main comics as well. And I did some more work at DC. Then around that time, I met Ed Brubaker, similarly because he had been reading my books, and he put me in touch with some people at Marvel. And so I started working with Axel. The first thing I did was a Punisher Max issue. After Garth Ennis had his long run, and there were some other crime writers. I think Victor Gischler worked on that. I believe Greg Hurwitz worked on it, and then I wrote one. It took a long time for that one to come out, but once it did come out, some other editors at Marvel got interested, and that's how I wound up doing Wolverine Max, and then some other graphic novels that I've been they had to pitch the old-fashioned way, just going cold to editors. And it never ends. I think people I think the misconception about breaking into comics and writing in general is that once you have your break, that's it. That's it. People want to know how you got started. I think every writer I know, and definitely for me in particular, like getting started never ends. Like you always have to pitch your new idea.
Yeah.
So to this day, I'm approaching editors, some of them cold, and I introduce myself and talk about what I've done. And maybe it helps that I've written stuff, and it might get me a little bit of an entree, but it's still really competitive. Everybody wants to work in comics. So I think the attitude you have to have for breaking in is to be unconventional. Like you don't know, there's no one way to do it. It's usually not as simple as like, hey, can you just introduce me to an editor? It usually doesn't work that way. Like you have to have some sort of track record yourself of producing stuff. So I mean, if I was starting out now, like I would in comics in particular, I would definitely be trying to do like web comics, like webtoon stuff, like stuff, anything you can get out there where you could start getting fans and some buzz going. And then when you approach an editor, you have something to point to. Hey, I've the guy who's been writing that. Yeah. So I think, you have to be sort of unconventional and try different things.
Yeah. I like it because you're like, it's, I always ask, like, how'd you get into comics? And it almost sounds like, how do you stay in the comics then too? Because like it's, like you said, it's a constant continuing to do that. So I discovered you through Red Border, and loved the book. And it was, now correct me if I'm wrong, it was one of the initial books when AWA was doing their first kind of wave launch, right?
Yeah, they did. They launched with four titles, and Red Border was one of them.
So how was that connection then, from kind of working with Marvel and DC then to kind of getting connected with AWA? Where did that kind of start from?
One of the founders of AWA is Axel Alonso, who is the editor-in-chief of Marvel. So when Axel was setting up AWA, I forgot who reached out to who, but we connected, and we had worked together before on Punisher and Wolverine, and he was open to hearing pitches, but you still have to connect with the right idea. So that's you still have to come up with the idea and make it work. Different from what I did in particular at Marvel, where I was working with licensed characters entirely. So you still have to come up with an idea for like what's Wolverine going to do, but at least at least you have some idea of something. The character's all set. When you're pitching things from scratch, you have to come up with obviously the characters also, and it's hard to know sometimes what's going to connect. So, but we did. Red Border was something that I think we were both excited about, like right away. Like we really felt like it could be a cool comic, potentially a movie or TV show. I know some stuff has been discussed on that track, but so we connected on that, and then it was one of the first ones.
That's so cool. Like it's got to be a cool experience too, to kind of be kind of on the ground floor of the new company that kind of is starting out. And it was a great book. If people haven't read it, I believe it's came out last fall in trade, right?
Yeah, it's out now it's in trade paperback. It came out in 4 issues, and then it was collected as a trade. All of the AWA trades have done really well, and Red Border is like a top 40 bestseller, so which is like amazing considering they're an indie publishers, and this was like their first wave of graphic novels, and I believe like all 4 books were I think they had 5 books in the top 40, so that was like really
that's neat. So because I know you started working on Red Border early, obviously before it launched. How soon from the time frame from Red Border were you working on your new book, Casual Fling?
It was, they were like one after each other, so like I'd already finished Red Border. I think one thing AWA certainly wants to do, and I believe is doing, is they want to have writers and artists complete the entire book before like even issue 1 comes out. So Casual Fling, for example, is like completely written at now, and like and all the art is done. So we're not like rushing to like make a deadline on it. So the books are in. So it was after I had completed Red Border.
Nice. That's so cool. So, we jumping in now into Casual Fling. Tell people, what is Casual Fling about? What's the elevator pitch of it?
It's an erotic. I haven't really practiced this elevator pitch, so like this is my first chance.
First time for everything.
It's an erotic thriller about it's about a marriage. It's about a woman and a man that've been married for about five, 8, 9 years, I think I said. And they have 2 kids, and they're kind of like at a place where they're, I think where people typically find themselves in a marriage, where like things are good, but they're not great. The stress of life is getting to them, and she makes a decision to have this fling, and things go like way off the wall after that. And it's sort of in the tradition of Fatal Attraction. I mean, that was a uh, big example, a book, movie that we certainly were talking about, like when I was uh, formulating the whole plot. But it goes like in a much, and I think a very unexpected direction. The type of revenge that she seeks against this person who has this really dark agenda is something that is very modern, very current, and it's a very sexy book. People, it's sort of like a voyeuristic feel you have when you're reading the book, but fortunately you don't have to deal with the consequences that she and the other characters have to deal with. But so it's sort of like that's why we call it an erotic thriller.
Yeah. Oh, that's, hey, for your first elevator pitch of the book, then that was a great job. So it seems like you wrote it, so you know what you're talking about.
And I didn't give away any plot twist either, so
That's good. Well, what I appreciated in checking out that first issue is you have such a talent of developing the characters in such a short time. And I think, like, I don't know what even it would be called, but like whether it's cut panels or anything, but like the scene at the bar where where the panel, they're having a conversation and it's a different conversation right next to it, and it's a different, so you can just tell it's kind of moving along time. um where did that kind of idea to move along the story come from? Was that something that you worked with your artists, or your editor, or?
um definitely with the editors. You know During the plotting stages, like,
Yeah.
it's pretty detailed, like what we're going to do in the first book, the second book, the third book, the fourth book. A lot of detail. I mean, much more detail than I usually have when I'm writing a novel, for
Okay.
example. Like, and I think that's important in a comic, because comics are all about space.
Right.
You have to end at 20 or 22 pages for the issues, so you really have to know where your cliffhangers are, um, what your plot is, to a much more managed extent than when you're writing a book, for example, a
Right.
novel. Um, so I had an idea of like the pace I wanted to have. But for as far as like getting that sort of natural feel, for me, it's always about that kind of stuff only comes when I actually start writing, because I could plot everything in advance, but until you actually start writing and you start writing some dialogue and you start writing the scene, um, I don't really know what the attitude of the character is going to be,
Yeah.
how they're going to behave in any situation, like where their humor is going to come from, what their voice is going to be. Like, so it's very hard in advance. Like, I could plot out every detail of something, but it's very hard to explain what the voice is until I start writing. So, I mean, that's something like I've done some screenwriting work, and I've pitched ideas in LA, and they always want to know like what the tone is of what you're
Yeah.
pitching, and that's always the hardest thing to crack, because I could always describe what the plot is. Um, Sometimes just to describe a tone, I have to say, compare it to something else. It's like The Sopranos meets, to give a sense of the tone, because I don't really know what it is until I'm actually writing something.
Yeah.
Until the characters, come to life, sort of. But dialogue comes natural to me,
Yeah.
so that part is comes more easily to me than the I mean, plotting, I think I've gotten good at over the years, but that always takes more um, planning than the dialogue. The dialogue is always more organic, and it just happens.
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that. I think it was in issue 1 of Red Border. At the back, you kind of had a letter in your, and you were talking about some of the stuff that was going through. You're like, listen, if something in this book offends you, don't blame me. It was the characters. It was their voice, because I just take it where they take me. And I thought that was brilliant. So when you brought it back into this, that was great.
Well,
But
that's just in case a family member reads it or something like that. Yeah.
but I really thought, like, because you, especially with a comic, you have such a, like you said, you have 22 pages usually, like you have such a short time to move the story along. But if you don't get that pacing right, it can feel like we're not invested in the characters. Why did this character make the decision that they made? Because there's not enough. And I think you did a really good job of the dynamics of the marriage, of the family situation, the work situation. That, that page, like I was talking about with the bar scene, it moved that story along well too, to get it to the point where you go, okay, I see where you're taking us here. And so I just think that was really cool to find.
Yeah, I mean, it's different. I mean, you're talking about Red Border, the
Yeah.
previous comic they did for AWA, and that's much more of a action driven story. If you compare like the first issue of Red Border to the first issue of Casual Fling, it's very extremely different.
Yeah.
I mean, Casual Fling might be more similar to some of my novel psychological thrillers I've written. So in Red Border, I could rely on the action. There's basically like a big chase going on. I mean, they're just trying to get away to the border. They have the cartel after them. Like, you don't know what's going to happen. Then there's like a surprise at the end of the issue that takes it in another direction. Here, it's the psychology. It's the family dynamics. It's a decision that the main character Jennifer's making. It's about these details that are very precise, and I can't just rely on action. So there has to be intrigue and suspense in the dialogue scenes themselves. So it's very, how they end. There's an element of mystery to it that isn't in Red Border, because Red Border is more of a thriller. This is like more of a mystery. So you wonder, like, what she meets this guy, and you wonder what his agenda is.
Right.
So that's where the suspense is coming from. So the suspense comes from like a different place. And I have to think of like I think you hear some sirens, New York City in the background.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the suspense comes from it's psychological suspense,
Yeah.
a lot of it. But the challenge writing a comic is, how do you make that visual? And I think Dalibor with his art did a great job of that, like just really noir sort of vibe to it, but also like cold foreboding. Like, you get a sense in the and the colors with Marco Lesco, like the just in the visuals, like you get a sense of foreboding, sense of not doom, or just at least like trouble that's like coming down the line.
Yeah, no, that's great. So what is your process, and how is your process different from writing a novel to writing a comic?
Well, one is definitely the amount of pitching and planning I have to do beforehand to write a comic. Comics are almost always extremely collaborative.
Yeah.
So you're collaborating with the editors at first, and then the artists. So there's more people involved, more voices. It's more collaborative. One time I was at a meeting at Marvel. Everyone was talking. I mean, I studied playwriting in graduate school, and everyone, like the editors there, everyone, oh, I have I was in theater, like, all the editor, like a bunch of editors, like had theater backgrounds, and I think that was interesting to me, because it does remind me of that. The collaboration in comics reminds me of the collaboration in theater, where there's a lot of people involved. Very different from writing a book, where it's just me in my own head. Ideally, I don't have to discuss it with anybody before I write it. I mean, sometimes you do, but depending on what sort of deal it is. But often I'm just writing a book and then sending it to an agent, editor, and I don't have a whole team with me. So it's. I mean, for me, it's nice, ideal in a perfect world, to do both. Like I could do something that's really internal inside my head. Definitely more total control when I'm writing a book, but on the other hand, there's some great things about collaboration also, like, that you it goes in directions you don't necessarily expect you're going to go in. And in a perfect world, everyone's coming up with better ideas than I could have come up with on my own. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's great. No, that's great. Well, and like even like the experience with that's got to be different. And then I'm guessing when it gets to the comics, it's got to be a little different. Like you mentioned earlier, like pitching a book compared to having something already written with Wolverine, where you have that character
Right.
established. So like, do you have a preference of what you kind of prefer when it comes to writing comics, of the pre-established characters that you can then take the story, or your own characters?
It's definitely a different set of challenges
Yeah.
with each one. I mean, it's definitely fun to write Wolverine. I mean, I remember it was just like, and when I did like Batman one, like it was just sort of surreal to like just be writing, Batman enters, like, it's just, um, it's definitely like playing. What do they call it? Like playing with the toys.
Yeah, playing with
Um,
someone else's toys. Yeah.
so and if there are iconic characters, I mean, I wrote some tie-in novels. I wrote the books to the Gotham TV series. I used those characters. An Ant-Man novel that was a tie-in to the movie. So even then, like I had, Tony Stark as a character,
Yeah.
character. But so when I'm doing comics, like it's definitely fun. It's a different set of challenges because in a totally original story like Casual Fling, I have to come up with the characters. I have to come up with their history. Everything is from scratch. In a pre-existing world, often the backstory is already written, or at least the characters' attitude and who they are, and
Right.
their sense of humor is already there. But the challenge is doing something fresh that hasn't been done before, because you're going to, you'll definitely hear it from the comics fans if you don't, if you do something that was already done, or, I mean, you're never going to please everybody. You're never going to take it in a direction that everybody wants to go, but you definitely have to do a lot more research on the history of the character, and so it's definitely different. Which do I like more? I've been evading that question.
It's all right. It's you on.
um I guess I'd say a combination. I mean, there are definitely some characters out there at Marvel and DC who I would love to be doing like an ongoing comic of. But barring that, I think like coming up with original ideas is great, and there's also more control over the rights to the project. Obviously, like there's more potential for like a movie or TV deal if it's your own idea, if you control the IP. So
Yeah. So, well, I mean, like you said, you've gotten to write iconic for DC being Batman. You got to write iconic for Wolverine. You said, like, is there someone that you haven't gotten to write for that you would like to still write?
For DC, you mean like a character for
Yeah, a
DC?
character for like DC or Marvel or.
Oh, yeah, like I think I'd be great doing Deadpool. I just think I would be a great match for the pop culture references, the darkness, sense of humor. I know I could do that. I mean, I've done a little Batman, and I did the Gotham origin story when I wrote the novel, but I'd love to like lean into either Batman or like some of the darker characters, Joker. That would definitely be right up my alley.
That's so cool. So, well, circling back real quick then to Casual Fling, you said at the very beginning that with AWA, you guys have everything written. So Red Border, I know, with 4 issues. What's the length of for Casual Fling?
4 issues also, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, the same amount. I think most of their original, I mean, their miniseries have been 4 or 5 issues.
Right. Well, again, thank you so much for just taking time. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but
Oh yeah.
do you have anything else that you're working on that you want to talk about, promote, or anything else that you'd like to just to share before we wrap up?
Yeah, I have a new novel coming out in the spring also. It's called Curved Glass. It's a alternate reality thriller that I'm really excited about. You could check out my website, www.jasonstarr.com, very easy, just my name, or follow me on Twitter and Instagram, read about the book. Yeah, I always have new projects in the works, kicking around some new comics ideas, working on a TV show based on one of my books. Has been in development for a while, but seems to have some momentum now. So I've been working a lot on that and just keep grinding.
Awesome. Well, so you said your website, and I'll have the links below. Where else can people follow you to kind of stay up to date with what you're doing?
Twitter, Instagram, Jason Starr Books. Just I'm there.
Awesome. Well, gang, thank you so much for watching this video. Thank you, Jason, so much for just taking some time to
Yeah,
talk
no,
about your
anytime.
novels and your comics with us. And Casual Fling, it drops, I believe, February 10th.
10. Yeah.
Yep. So if you're watching this, make sure you go to your LCS and pick it up on February 10th.
Yeah, there's 2 covers. There's a variant cover by Mike Giotto also. Yeah.
Nice. Well, gang, with that being said, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.